Good.
Okay, recording is started. So today is October the 27th, 2025. This is the GBOS quarterly meeting with the municipality and the municipal manager. Girdwood Supervisor Committee subject to the Alaska Open Meetings Act, as found in Alaska Statute 44.62.310 and Anchorage Municipal Code 1.25 public meetings, but note the item later. Board of Supervisors operates under the Girdwood Public Meeting Standard of Conduct. Call the meeting to order at 4:01. Let's do a quick roll call. We can do that, I think, individually.
Brianna Sullivan here.
And Mike Eddington.
Brian Burnett here.
Do we have Jennifer online?
I don't see her yet.
Okay. And I think Kelly is still excused. And then municipal staff, would you like to start?
Sure, Becky Pearson, Municipal Manager. I see our legal team of Quincy Arms and Zach Schwartz online, and also the Community Development Real Estate team with Tiffany Briggs online as well. We should be joined by a few other people as well. So I may ask if we might reorder the agenda to take up the things that these guys are equipped to address before we get to potentially like the items where we need them, the office of management and budget. They are planning to come. And I was just texting the director to talk about the IGC question that you all had raised and have as item number 1. But if I might ask for that from the chair, that was
sure. So we'll do the land acknowledgement first, then we'll rearrange.
Perfect.
Choose the item which comes first. So start with the land acknowledgement, Brian.
Gladly. The Girdwood Board of Supervisors acknowledges the indigenous peoples of Alaska whose land we reside on. The community of Girdwood, situated between the areas known to be the Naina and Woodkick homeland, respects the people who were stewards of this land for generations. We commit to the continued stewardship of this land and are grateful to be part of a wider community that seeks to maintain a sustainable use of Girdwood Valley for present and future peoples.
Thank you. We probably don't have any disclosures, so we'll just jump straight in. So welcome everybody. I think everyone knows each other. So should we start on item 1? I see Ross is here, or is that later? Right?
Not Ross who we need, it's ONA who we need. So if I might request that we start with 2 and just soldier on from there, and then we can get to OMB, because then we can address everything else without ONA. And then when she arrives, she can address the IGC's issue.
Okay. So we can jump to item 2. So first of all, I'll just ask staff, what's the status of the contract at the moment? I hear we have to re-sign.
Yeah, so we have to do a new contract because of the increase for, let me bring Jennifer in. Do the increase for the dispatch services, which was approved through the board. The original contract, which had a 2-year extension, didn't recognize that increase when the assembly approved it. They just recognized the services that Whittier provides, and the increase is related to the dispatch going over to Valdez now. So we have written a new 2-year contract, and from the Muni side, the draft has been completed and sent to Whittier for their review. And if they have we didn't really change much. We just added in the new increase for Valdez. And if they have no issues with it, then we'll get a final draft and get it around for signatures and then to assembly for approval as a new contract for 2 years.
Okay, thank you. And I think there's time for the assembly approval. So the second part, first of all, sorry, I should acknowledge Jennifer Wingard has joined us. Can you hear us, Jennifer?
Perfect, thank you.
You haven't missed item 1. We've just pushed that back in the agenda until OMB arrives. So we're starting on item 2. The second part was WPD enforcement of municipal misdemeanors. So our understanding is that at the moment, WPD does not enforce municipal misdemeanors. We've seen quite a few ordinances in the last year or 2 where the only enforcement mechanism is through municipal misdemeanors. But our understanding is they're not enforceable in Girdwood. And that obviously poses some questions about equity and enforcement of municipal code, things like fires, etc. And it's not clear, at least to me, and I don't think we've ever had an explanation to the board of exactly why this is. We know there was a problem with parking, which was very specific because parking was called out in Anchorage code as only enforceable by Anchorage Police Department at the time, and subsequent change to code allowed it to be enforced by any certified police within the municipality. So I guess the question is, I'm not sure which side, whether it's an issue that we have to address, whether it's an issue the municipality has to address, whether it's an issue WPD or the state have to address. I'd just like to sort of start this discussion.
I think Zach Schwartz is teed up to respond to this question.
Okay.
He's been doing some looking into this. So can we turn it to you, Zach?
Yeah, so based on what I found,
Just
there is,
introduce yourself. Zach, could you just introduce yourself for the record, please?
oh yeah, Zach Schwartz, Assistant Municipal Attorney. So there is charter limitations on policing of vehicle infractions, and so Whittier Police has been delegated to enforce parking violations, and I don't know if we could allow them to enforce other more serious traffic violations. But as far as Title 8, it does look like there's nothing in code that would stop us from entering into an agreement with Whittier Police Department that allows them to enforce Title 8. Alaska statute set 2904010 says, subject to other provisions of law, municipalities have the power to enter into an agreement of any function or power with a municipality. And so it would have to be negotiated with Whittier and then assembly approval, but it looks like we could include that in their enforcement abilities.
Okay, thank you. So I guess the other question is from the Whittier Police Department side. I know they work with the state prosecutors. Does there need to be more work on? Do we need to just start that discussion now there, or I'm not sure quite how this process works. So what are the next steps, I guess?
Well, I think there's maybe it's a two-step process. One is we want to make sure that they're going to continue to be the police department starting after this year. So completing that contract first. And then if we want to go further with them on seeing about getting them involved to start enforcing municipal ordinances, we probably have to figure out the logistics of that, what that means. So they start working with the municipal prosecutor's office versus the state. And what does that mean for their workload and services that do they have to like create a whole new ticketing system? And what does that mean? And so I think if we get through and they're on contract and we're looking to maybe establish more services from them, then we would probably have to go through that process and see if that does cost more. If we have to do that, we probably have to go through another contract process and get that figured out.
Okay.
So I think once we get established that they are all set to go for 26 and 27, then we can start that discussion with the chief and see what they say.
Okay.
Figure out what's legit.
So we can, it looks like from the municipal side, there's a mechanism. We can put a pin in this and maybe restart discussion next year.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Kyle, could I ask, does the contract specifies they only enforce state statute right now? I admit I don't have it in front of me. So
Yes.
Also, okay, so we'd have to actually amend the contract and request that, and they'd presumably ask for something in return.
And their whole structure for prosecution is under the state structure.
Okay.
So they don't work with municipal prosecutors. They and they use the state statutes for all their enforcement ticketing.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board on this topic? Community? Okay. We'll go to item number 3. Jennifer, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Well, we already have the extension, I believe. Is that correct for the comment period?
Yeah, I'll let Tiffany speak to it, but what she had articulated was that we could accept comments after the next GBOS meeting without an issue and have time to be able to compile them as needed for the next step in the process. But Tiffany, could you speak to that directly? This is the ask about being able to submit comments after the date of the next GBOS meeting for part of the HLB process.
Sure, Tiffany Briggs, Real Estate Director. Yes, we can accept comments after the official due date. We know that GBOS has a meeting the next day, so we would accept comments for a few days after our official date. It would still give us time to go through our process.
Tiffany, could you clarify what a few days means with specificity, just so we have a final due date for the GBOS team?
If they could have it to us no later than Friday, the
21st.
the 21st.
Thank you. Any further questions from the board first on? Sorry, Jennifer, go ahead.
No.
Okay. Any other questions from the board first on the due date? Okay. Do you have a question on the due date or was it something
Yes.
else major?
I do have a question on that due date. Can you specify that even though you're going to accept them up until the 21st, will they be formally accepted and included in the work plan, or is that just you'll receive and respond?
My understanding is they will be formally accepted, but I'll let Tiffany reconfirm.
Yes, they would be formally accepted.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. And then there's a second part to this as well, which I'll start off and then we'll hand it over to Jennifer. So we passed a resolution last week supporting the addition of a second Girdwood seat, allocated to a Girdwood resident on the HLBAC. Hopefully you've received. And I know there was a draft ordinance as well. I don't know if everyone has some timing for when we should see when that's likely to go through the assembly process.
I think we were waiting on this conversation to drop it in. And then
Okay.
we'll drop it in
And the second part to that was this was with the context of we were discussing, we didn't make a final decision to support a larger number, but we've been discussing for a while whether 2 was where we wanted to finally settle with or whether 2 is just on the journey to 3. And I just wanted you to be aware of that. Jennifer, please go ahead.
So I thought we were maybe going to tackle this by seeing how this first one flies and then take it from there. Was that our agreement from the previous meeting?
Approximately, yes. Yeah, so that's
And if I might.
yes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's good to know for awareness from, I did talk about it with the mayor's team a bit as well, just to, think about our approach. And I would just reiterate our thoughts that we talked about in the pre-meeting, which is that we'd like to start with this one addition. We'll see how this, how it improves both the HLB dynamic in terms of the group of voice and also in terms of how it works with having assembly buy-in to this change. And then I think we consider it from there. Again, like anything, that's a work in progress, see what happens.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the board?
What's the current makeup, the demographic of the board? The breakdown is anybody from Eagle River, Chugach, in amongst the Anchorage Bowl delegates.
So we have 1 Eagle River Chugach resident, 2 Girdwood residents, and 3 Anchorage. And then 1 vacancy. And 1 vacancy.
Yeah, Jeremy Hurst as well. So, that starts soon.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
He
right.
recently.
I could follow up. I think maybe Brian meant to also include there, thank you for your answer. The Eagle River seat is a designated seat, correct?
That is correct. They have to be a Eagle River Chugach resident, same as we have Girdwood residents.
Thank you.
Right.
Jennifer?
So in light of that, I'm curious if we should encourage Girdwood residents to apply for that open vacancy, or if we're at our 2 seats already.
I mean, I think I would say that the mayor's office considers all qualified candidates in terms of for appointment to the boards and commissions. And so certainly seeks to be required to fulfill minimum compositions, but don't consider those ceilings. So to the extent there are other fantastic candidates you would want to encourage from the Girdwood Valley.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I just have
Let me
one.
ask a follow-up.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
please go. Go ahead.
Then the follow-up question would be that I believe that there were multiple applications for the last open seat. Would those people need to reapply if they are interested, or do those applications carry over?
That's a good question. I think they carry over, but I'd have to specifically reconfirm with Marie Houston, the mayor's office, but I can reconfirm that and circle back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one last question on this as well, which is since we have a lawyer sitting in the room, a crack team of lawyers waiting for a question. I think the code actually says Girdwood area resident. What does that actually mean? Does that mean anyone from Turnagain Arm? Does it mean anyone from Girdwood Valley? Does it mean Portage? What does it? Does it only mean the service area? What does that actually mean?
Zach is letting me take it, but I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I don't think, I mean, Girdwood has boundaries, right, somewhere in our code. So I could pull them out and find them for you, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Well, it doesn't specifically say Girdwood service area. It says just Girdwood area. And I didn't know whether that meant the whole of the valley or generally Turnagain Arm, or whether it means the service area alone. I think we've always assumed it meant the valley, but I just wondered if it could be interpreted more broadly than that.
Yeah, I think it could probably be interpreted multiple ways. We would look for the interpretation that's most supported in our code. And would probably mean the service area. But
Okay.
you want me to dig deeper?
I will leave it to
Sure, but let's dig deeper, just so we're sure, Quincy.
Okay.
thank you. Okay, any more questions on this item? Okay, thank you. I see Henry's online. Should we go back to item number 1?
Sure, absolutely. Ona, if you're ready, we'll go back to item number 1 and talk about the intergovernmental charges in the GVSA budget.
Sure thing. I mean, as ready as I can be for this conversation, which will, I'm sure, require additional research and response. But yes, I want to know what the questions are so we can answer them.
I'll start and then I'll hand over to Kyle, who's the expert in the room. So we've had a question. I think every time we come around to budget time, we look at our estimates, what the budget should be, and there's this big chunk called IGC, intergovernmental charges. And for some of our services, it's basically $0 or a couple of $100. For some of our services, it's $700,000. And during the course of the year, we eventually see a breakdown of where they come from, but they're extremely unclear what we're likely to get charged for, what we actually get charged for. There's not a great deal of clarity here, and I think I'm not speaking for everybody, but at least from my point of view, getting better clarity and better predictability of what they are would be really helpful. They sit at around 13% maybe of our total levy. And they seem almost uncontrolled from our perspective. I've probably slightly misstated it, so if there's anything you want to add, Kyle.
No, I think that's it. I think the more clarity on how IGCs are calculated, and yeah, I think that's probably a good place to start.
And
Okay, I think.
Sorry.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
I was going to say, I think we have a lot of options for this conversation. The first of which is, I am more than happy to schedule time either as part of this meeting or other meetings to sit down with anybody from the board or from Girdwood with Marilyn Bonzoff, our IGC specialist, and she can go through, down to the teeny tiny line item, how they are split out, and we can provide that in advance, of course, but happy to do a walkthrough individually around what these are. The idea that they are uncontrolled or outside of how your budget is built, I won't say is entirely true, but it certainly is true in that the IGCs are not about your budget. They're about the municipality's budget at large and the operations and functions of all departments within the municipality and the proportional cost associated with Girdwood's operations, the same way the IGCs in other categories in other departments are quantified the same way. It's not necessarily how much your budget moves, it's how much the budget of the impacted department providing those services moves and the proportional payment that has to be made by all of the departments that pay into that IGC. So there are a handful of challenges that we've seen with IGCs over the last 5 years in particular. One of which is the sale of ML&P means that I think everybody's IGC calculation and the way it was configured was changed, and we lost a major payer into the IGCs. So as part of the ML&P sale, we knew that the IGC changes would increase. I think what we have seen with IGCs across the board is that they are viewed as somewhat of a black box and there's little visibility into them. I think when you request the visibility into them, you can see the line item broken out by how much money is being charged where and why. And then I think the next step in the interrogation is, is that representation right, wrong? Should it be different? Should it be updated? And so knowing specifically what Girdwood's IGCs are and what they are made up of is something that I think we can sit down with Kyle and go through, or anybody. If there are.
Yeah, there they are. There they are. Oh, no, this is how they're made up.
This is Girdwood Fire and Rescue. And so I think what happens is sometimes like say right there, the IGC for the AFD shop, is $220,000. And so that's something that I know catches the attention of GBOS. So I think with each budget, there's some things that are always unique that we get. For example, with roads, our street maintenance budget from 24 to 25, our general liability went from 2,400 to 26,000. So there's some of those things that jump out there, and maybe that could be.
Well, you said, tell me the roads one. Tell me roads again. You said it went from 24,000 to 2,400 to 26,000. 26,000
between year operating term 24 to 25, I believe. I usually when we do the budgets, I try to get GBOS a 3 to 4 year perspective of all of our budgets so they can see where things are rising.
Good job, Kyle.
So, but yeah, we just catch those as they come along. And the fire department's always been the highest of our IGCs. As you can see, they're at 475. And overall their direct budget is 1.5 million. So that's a big chunk of change there that drives up their budget to.
Kyle, is your concern that you don't see operationally any of those things? Because I know the theory of IGCs, right, is that there's all these central services that everybody supports through all the different departments. Is your operational concern that you don't see the fire department utilizing these parts of the overall fire system services, or that this seems overpriced for what they are doing?
There's a little bit of that with that. Like you can see here, IGC, AFD, operations management, and then we have an office of fire chief, and then you get down into shop. So there's a lot of, seems like there's sort of little different draws or straws sucking off that fund. And we're trying to understand it. Are they seeing that coming back? And I can realize that especially the AFD chop can be difficult to estimate because, we may have years of vehicles that don't break down, and then we have years where vehicles
break down at once.
So yeah, and we've been making a strong push to replace the equipment over there and get them. So I think we're seeing less requirement of the shop, whereas maybe just 3 years ago we were seeing a lot. So that could be pushing the number from years past. So I think that's. If anything, and I think the board here, some of them haven't been through the educational program on IGCs. And so when we get talking about it, it's always nice to hear from OMB about how these are calculated and how they work. And there may not be a black hole of money that's going into it. It definitely feeding something that supports the service area.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. And I think that if you want to set up time that we go over the IGC education process, like I said, I'm more than happy to do that. And if there are other budgetary items that you want to add to that conversation, either for education or, conversation and brainstorming, I'm more than happy to, make it more than just an IGC conversation, but I'm open for either of those things. Is that something you would want us to do as a next step in the conversation, is sort of do an IGC rundown?
I'm looking to the board.
I'd like to thank you. Oh, no, this is Brianna. I'm the fire department supervisor, and I think Chief Weston would probably be a great person to have involved in those meetings so that she can also explain, yes, to her board, because there's a fire board that's a nonprofit that meets, and they were asking of her and each other, what is that, and that, what are those charges? And we didn't have this detailed description that's on the screen right now. So it is helpful to have just this summary you stated, and then communicating that via Chief Weston would be helpful. And she has the knowledge of all the years here in Girdwood as well. But we have the numbers on inside the packet here of 25 and forecasted for 26 for the IGCs. And it says it's about 5.9% of the fire budget. Actually, it's second. Third?
Yeah.
Or what is the 5.9 mean? Sorry, functional cost. So it obviously it's going up for 26. So they're all asking too. That's all I have.
Yeah, I would certainly be interested in going through the IGC education as I have not been exposed to it at all.
Thank you. Donna?
Thank you through the chair. I was going to say, I think this will be a great place to start. I think IGCs are confusing at best, but being able to sort of identify what they are, why they are in our budgets, and how they impact across the board is a place we can start, and then we can go into the very specifics of what Girdwood's IGCs are and what changes we might or could expect over the next few years, if there are any that we're aware of right now. But I think there's also been some budget transitions over the last few years in terms of updating information and making sure everything is accurate, et cetera, et cetera. And I see this as a good opportunity to sort of make sure that where we're at is where we should be, and make that a group conversation.
Thank you. I just want to say, when I used the word uncontrolled, I didn't mean that it's not controlled from an accounting point of view or a budgetary point of view. What I meant is it's unclear to us what changes in behavioral policy, how they affect the IGC numbers. I'm only partially educated on this from previous years, and my recollection is some of these charges are basically just an overhead fixed cost that we get hit with, and some are dependent on how much we use the service. So just
that's exactly right, Chair. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when we do budget calculations, when we do the budget process with them in the late summer to early fall, we just use the numbers from the current year to give us an idea, knowing that we probably will see a little bit of increase, so that we're always trying to control where we're at with the mill rate. And so we use those current numbers, knowing that there'll probably be a little bit of increase for next year. Hopefully a decrease, but we don't see it too often.
That's right. I'm sure costs are going to go down.
There was one here between 24 audit and then 25 revised, so that's a good sign.
And just we're getting fairly close to the to our local tax cap mill rate.
Yes.
So there's more sensitivity to these sorts of things. Okay. Any other questions, comments from the board?
We'll work on a work session at some point for scheduling that together.
Thank you very much, Anna.
Yes, happy.
Let's move on to item number 4 then. Discuss area-wide police IT special tax levy class. So I'll start this one. A few years ago, a few years ago. The tax levy was voted on, introduced for, I think it was for Anchorage Police IT services. It included, the justification I recall from the time was, of it being area-wide was the majority of the funding was being spent on changes to the dispatch system. And all, even our service area, which uses a different police service, still used the same dispatch system. So this was 4 or 5 years ago, I think. So the original justification was that this was an area-wide service. It was area-wide capability. So it's an area-wide tax levy. Since then, typically what I've seen is the resolution that authorized the levy and the resolution that authorizes how it's spent have been disjoint. They've been done at different times. This year, they happen to be on the same agenda. And I noticed that now the money is spent purely on facilities for APD. I think drones, potentially AI tools, etc. I think license capabilities for using feeds from ring cameras, etc. And I just had this question of, if it's an area-wide tax, shouldn't this also be available for any IT or potentially capital needs for police services across the whole of the municipality? And I guess that's the question. Can it be? Is it? How do we go about getting any requests and requirements from our service provider? And then what things would be suitable, given that they would have to be municipally owned?
Yeah, and to the chair, it's a good question, and that's what we talked about on our side. Was among staff was trying to figure out how it would operationally work, because I think at a baseline, yes, it's an area-wide levy. Anything that falls within the description, you'll call the language from the 2021 ballot proposition has a list of things that actually fit in the box of what the levy can support, and the end caveat of and related technology, which allows for a little bit of flexibility. The challenge would be the fact that we'd have to figure out a way to have the equipment would have to be purchased and owned by the municipality and used within the municipality. So it wouldn't be something that the Whittier Police Department could take and use in Whittier as part of their Whittier police services and then just happen to use it here while they're here. So I think if there was something, I think we kind of turn the question back of what would Whittier want? What would the Girdwood community want the Whittier Police Department to have that they don't have? And then how would we propose managing? Because I think technically it is possible within the parameters of the levy. Clearly, it goes into the big picture meta question of everybody's department requests and how much money there is and how much money is requested. But I think the practical challenge for the Girdwood Valley Service Area would just be figuring out a mechanism for owning, maintaining, repairing, replacing technology that lives here but is utilized by contractors coming to use it. It's not impossible, clearly, but just we have to have that thought.
So just a small nuance here. When you say Girdwood Valley, it wouldn't necessarily have to be held by Girdwood Valley. They also do Portage Valley and other parts of the municipality. Yeah. And does that same restriction apply to APD if they're involved if they're called to help something that happens just over the border in Matsu? They wouldn't be allowed to use any equipment that was funded by this tax levy? I don't know that we engage in. My understanding is that any time that we engage in any services outside the border of the municipality, we do so pursuant to a mutual aid agreement under which we are recompensed for our work fully by the other agency who has asked for our assistance, plus fire and police. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Ona has her hand up. Yes, Ona.
I just had a question, and I wanted to, I'm not sure if part of what the chair had mentioned at the beginning was that we had changed E911 surcharge allocations, and that is separate and different than the APD IT levy that was voted on by the community in 2020 or 2021. And the E911 surcharge increase was a state legislative change that allowed additional reimbursement to come through specifically for those things associated with dispatch and the other statutorily restricted costs that E911 revenue can be used for.
Okay, thank you.
There may be two revenues there.
So I guess in that case, the question is, there is a question of what was the justification for this to be a tax levy on area-wide rather than on AMSA, rather than the Anchorage Municipal Police Service area. And maybe nobody knows the answer right now, but that might be helpful to understand if there's a boundary on what equipment it could be.
Let's see if I have it still pulled up on my computer. I pulled it up earlier today to look at the legislative history, just to remind myself of the phrasing. Let me see if I still have it. Close to that.
I guess to pull out again to the broader question, it sounds like there is, at least in principle, this could be spent on equipment that is owned by the municipality but used by Whittier Police Department to perform services within the municipality. And I guess the broader question is again, what are the next steps? Can we get a clearer description of what the boundaries would be so we can work with Whittier and see if there's any equipment that would benefit?
Did you get a sense from them, Mr. Joe, of what they want? Like, is it that they would like body cameras or as well to use, or what is the?
Body cameras might be difficult, I think, in terms of the boundary issue, but
Yeah.
I had a very unofficial conversation with the chief, and he said there would definitely be things on the list, but we haven't started pursuing it because we don't know what the boundaries are around that.
Okay.
So it's kind of, if we can get clarification, first of all, clarification of yes, this does appear to be something which could provide funding, and then if we get some clarification on what those boundaries would be, then we can potentially find things that would be suitable.
Okay. I do think the initial answer is yes, it is something that can be used, but with the challenges of operationalizing it, given that,
Yes.
again, that's how we usually, when we don't usually allow things to happen outside of municipal borders unless pursuant to being paid for them by other agencies. I think you're really looking for maybe a legal question of how we would advise and looking at, like, are you looking for sort of how would we advise, like they could take it home, but they could turn it off, or like that kind of specificity? Like, what are you really looking for in terms of further specificity from us?
Maybe with the information we've had so far may be enough to
Okay.
start, then go down the
Yeah.
path of saying, well, here are some potential things. Would they fall within or without that definition?
And I think that may be why I keep turning it around to like, what do they want? Because I think it's probably a different
Yeah.
answer if it's like, there is you want to get a robot dog that you can use here in Girdwood for entry into, as whatever, the various ways in which we use the robot dog. Or if you want to have body cameras on individual police officers that they would have to drive home, I think the answer might be slightly different.
Right. Okay.
But the overall answer is I think the thing has to be owned, operated, maintained, and used in the municipality.
Right.
Yeah.
Or under
a
Potentially.
situation where we're paid for the use of
Yes.
by the other party, again.
Yeah. So I could see some negotiated argument where perhaps some of the funding is paid elsewhere, some of the funding is paid here. It's something we use at both locations.
Yeah.
There's a conversation to have now.
Absolutely.
Now we've got the
Yes.
parameters of the question.
That might lead to, if we do find that we can negotiate with Whittier to have them start enforcing municipal code, there may be a ticketing system with their own ticketing
Right. Yes.
software and printing device that they use to print municipal ordinances or
Yep.
statutes. So
In the building. Jennifer, please go ahead.
I just wanted to follow up on your question, actually, or did you decide that it was irrelevant about why we were included in this in the first place?
I don't think it's irrelevant. I'm still intrigued as to why, but there probably isn't going to be an answer coming to us in this meeting.
There doesn't appear to be.
Oh, no, I knew that.
Yeah, there does not appear to
Sorry,
be
I was.
an explanation in the, I have the AM in front of me. I was trying to figure out if maybe there was an explanation of the scope of it in the legislative history. There isn't. So I think we will have to go back to, I know Mr. Falsey drafted this, so he probably has the best recollection of the conversation among municipal senior staff. So we can certainly go back and try and excavate history and figure out what the thinking was at the time.
does this have anything to do with Turnigan arm policing and Seward Highway? Because
It preceded that.
it seems about the same time when we were trying to find a way to fund leasing on the Seward Highway, because it was outside so the Seward Highway became its own zone.
It could have been coincident in the sense that there were two different service areas at the time. it was the Seward Highway, and potentially even the Turnigan Police Service area. So there may have been multiple service areas. It's easier to say area wide, but obviously 3 of those are serviced by the services provided by APD, and 1 isn't. So that's the odd one out. I know.
And I don't know if it was because of perhaps it was driven by the computer aided dispatch and records management system expenses at the time.
Right.
And those are the area wide elements, because the other things listed are again, it's again specific to CAD and RMS, and then has a digital evidence management systems and in-car body cameras element to it. So maybe it's driven by that.
That is what I remember being part of the dispatch system.
But I can confirm and circle back.
Dr. Browse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to say some of that that has already been said, but I think that from my perspective, as far as the legal allowance as to whether or not it can be used, once that's determined, then it becomes a matter of whether or not it's a capital asset that would or should be municipally owned and operated or provided for in some other fashion. And so I think that the area-wide consideration may have been made specifically so that multiple votes wouldn't have had to occur for multiple service areas, but we can drill down into that and get that specific legal answer, but then whether or not it's accessible for use by multiple service areas within area-wide, I think that we can figure out what constitutes a capital asset and how it would be managed, et cetera. And then it becomes a, budget discussion of what's available and when.
Yeah, thank you. Any further questions on this? It sounds like there's some research to be done.
Certainly, we'll circle back with an answer on the history and why it ended up where it was. And then I think once we know what is desired, we can start thinking about why it's not where it was.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions on this?
Another question really fast.
Yep.
This just reminds me of last year, and it's not IT equipment, but when we were coming up with alcohol facts from Whittier Police, they had, I believe, radios and breathalyzer tests and fell under that category. So those were needs at the time, but these would be different.
Move on to item number 5, clarification of 2025-91 regarding Open Meetings Act. This is probably a little bit broader than just that, AO. A while ago, probably about a year ago, the Ombudsman informed us that that they had that Girdwood committees, particularly Land Use Committee and Trails, didn't fall under Open Meetings Act and didn't have to follow the 1.25. I think it already been determined that it didn't have to follow 115, the ethics code. And we were kind of being aware of that, but we were told by the Ombudsman that it didn't fall under 1.25 or OMA either. We did ask for a copy of that to be briefed on the exact details of the opinion. We've never actually seen it, but that's now become at least partially codified in this ordinance. So what we're trying to understand really is what does this mean in terms of our Land Use Committee, which is one person, one vote committee, and Trails, which is one person, one vote committee, and does the same thing apply to our committees that are appointed, where we have 5 members of the public specifically named, and the committee acts as a sort of advisory with specific people on it, as opposed to these very open groups that effectively are, could be up to 2,000 people as members of. So we were just trying to get some better clarification on what this actually means. We're going through an update to our rules and procedures as well. So it would be good to understand what this means in practice. And again, it may be there's a lot of nuance, and this becomes a much longer discussion than we can hold today. Any initial answers would be helpful.
And Zach has this question, I think, teed up as well. So I'll turn it to him for his thoughts.
Yeah, thanks. I don't think anything has changed with this new AO. If there are no members of the supervisory board on the ad hoc committees, then the Open Meetings Act doesn't apply. And Was that a question?
No, I was going to say that was a sort of shockingly clear answer from a lawyer.
Oh, tough crowd. Can we make fun of accountants after this?
We do have accountants as well. I'm going to hand it over to other board members. That actually answers my core question. Thank you. But I'll hand it over to other board members. Is there anything else you want to ask on this?
I heard, okay, without looking around. I heard you, Zach, thank you, say if no supervisor is on the ad hoc committee, then OMA does not apply. So I think that's pretty clear if I look at each of the boards, well, they're not boards, all of them, but committees, then that could make sense to me. Jennifer,
thank you. Jennifer, go ahead.
I don't know if I'm allowed to ask this or not because that is actually about 2.40-.035 about the community councils. So through the chair, can I bring that up now? Is it related enough?
I should think so.
Okay. This was brought to my attention recently that there's a line that got changed in September that says when the Girdwood Board of Supervisors meets as a community council only with no order of business related to its service area board functions and duties, only then is it not subject, to chapter 1.25 of this code. And I listened to the work session about this and just was very confused about when or how we would ever meet as a community council only. And so I guess my question is, like, one, where did this come from? And two, what is it trying to accomplish?
I don't know the history on that.
We don't know the history on that.
Okay, fair enough. I did not give you a prep time on this. I'm sorry. I didn't. That came up over the weekend, so I just thought I'd ask just in case somebody did know off the top of their head. Thanks.
If I understand your question correctly, that is the change that this AO implemented. And the way again, I'm not a lawyer, but the way I understand it is the meeting we had last Tuesday, for example, where we met with LUC, and all we considered was the presentation from CY Investments about Halton Hills. That was purely a land use matter. So I think based on the current code, the code that was changed a month or so ago, that would mean that the meeting wasn't mandatorily subject to the Open Meetings Act. We could choose to follow exactly the same process, and we did. I don't think there's anything to stop you from following tighter procedures, but I think the way I interpret that code change is that there's not a requirement to follow the Open Meetings Act. But I think that was an example of something where we met as GBOS, but we met purely to discuss a land use issue. And there was nothing else on the agenda.
Okay, thank you. It sounds like maybe what I can do is ask for further clarification on this at another meeting, but thank you for that. That's helpful.
Thank you. Did you have a question? Okay. Okay, thank you. I think that's actually really helpful. Thank you very much, Zach. So if there's no more questions on that, we can jump straight to item 6. We have just over 10 minutes, 12 minutes left. This is the next steps on the leaseback funding for Girdwood capital projects. To just remind everyone where we were. Historically, Girdwood has been unsuccessful in getting bonds for capital projects. Typically, Girdwood is voting yes by 75, 80, 85, 90% in favour, and the municipality as a whole votes no. So we can't get bonding, but we still have needs for capital. So the suggestion, I'm not sure leaseback is the right term, but the suggestion which came in one of our previous municipal manager meetings of effectively raising capital through leasing some of the infrastructure in Girdwood. And I guess the question is, what's next? What would we have to do if we as a board decide we want to? I think understanding a little bit better and then allowing us to have that discussion and understanding what the next steps would be helpful.
Okay. Ross, do you want to, Ross Oswald is on, and I'm wondering if he wants to take the explanation in a little bit more depth. of what exactly we would do. And again, I think part of what we do next depends on this question, Mike, that you raised last week, which was, is there enough space under the cap in terms of how Girdwood is taxing already to make the payments? Because we would effectively do a lease back transaction of essential government buildings in Girdwood, potentially including the building we're sitting in right now. It's just a financing mechanism. And then the payments on that would be made using some funding coming from the service area. And the initial thing we proposed was a special levy that's just within the service area to pay it back. But then you raised that question. So I think there's a space for, we probably need to do a calculation of how much space is there under the cap in Girdwood and how much of a lease, like how much capital could that payment generate? But Cynthia, I think, is unmuted and I think is ready to give better answers to these questions than I'm ready to give. So Cynthia, should I turn it to you?
This is Cynthia Weed. Hello. We are acting as bond counsel to the municipality. The legal mechanism for actually getting the money is a mechanism that we have used relatively regularly at the municipality. And that is a lease and lease back of certain assets. And so the lease payments that are ultimately made under the lease back are what's used to actually provide the repayment of the obligation, the borrowed money. And the money that is received from the bank lender under the original lease is what is used to undertake the capital projects. So the lease and lease back is just the use of asset. It's an asset-based financing, but you're not actually leasing out the asset that you're funding. We're basically getting money for funding by leasing out certain of your existing assets and then leasing them back. And the lease back is what pays the bank back from the loan, for the loan. Now, in the course of this discussion early this evening, or late afternoon, it has sounded as if you're thinking of using a special tax levy, like property taxes, in the Girdwood area, or in order to actually make those lease payments, to actually pay back for the cost of the improvements. I have, in earlier emails, received a suggestion that instead of using property taxes, there would be an assessment under Title 19 of the Municipal Code. That is an assessment on properties within the Girdwood area that are specially benefited by the improvements. That if you're using special assessments, that does not actually affect the property tax cap. That's the good news. The tougher news.
Could I ask a question about that? Because in that instance, that's a new proposal to me. So I don't know if that was the conversation I wasn't a part of. That proposal would mean that the only people who would pay for the improvement would be those. So in this instance, specifically, if we're talking about Timberline Road paving, in that idea, only those people whose properties abut or utilize Timberline Road would be assessed that special assessment?
The concept of the special assessment is the properties whose value increases as a result of these improvements are the parties who will actually pay the debt service. So effectively, the special assessment is an assessment upon the properties whose property values go up as a result of the undertaking of the improvements. I can't say that this was discussed widely. It was discussed in emails that I have seen exchanged internally about the way.
Third route to make the payment. So one route is we look at what's available under the cap already. Right. And then a second route is we pass a special levy that applies to everyone within GVSA. And then a third route is a special assessment on only those properties who would see a specific benefit from the project, which is funded by the lease back transaction. Am I summarizing correctly, Cynthia?
That is correct. I will admit that the option that was first exercised, which is getting the approval not only of the voters in Girdwood and the approval of the municipality as a whole, is probably would provide the lowest interest cost. That is because it then is sold as a general obligation of the municipality, overall municipality itself. Although the property owners in Girdwood are the first taxes that are basically authorized. But so these are other options for financing these improvements that we're discussing today, though, other than going to the voters and getting the approval from the voters in Girdwood as well as municipality wide.
And that, I think, is the core reason of asking the question, because we've been unsuccessful in having voters municipality-wide support for with specific projects. And so we are by necessity looking at other directions.
Right.
So I think the short answer is we need to come back to you with the 3 different financial options laid out a little bit more in detail, because I think from there, if the special levy is how we'd like to go, then the order of operations is to introduce an ordinance, and that goes to the assembly, and that goes to the ballot, and it goes to the Girdwood voters in April. And then once that passes and there's a mechanism to pay for the lease back transaction, then the public finance group actually does the lease back. If we make a different decision, like we can do the special assessment that pencils, it's not an unduly onerous amount of money for the people whose properties are benefited. I haven't looked at a map. I don't know how many people would even fall into that category. And then similarly, or if we decide to go the route of figuring out what space there is under the cap, then we would figure all that out, and then from there again move forward with lease back. So I think there's probably some homework for us to do on our end to come back with how the financial options pencil, and then we'll go from there. We do have enough time at this point to, I think, to do that and talk about it in the next month or so before we get to the point where it becomes imperative to have an ordinance ready to go.
That was my next question.
Yeah.
About if it was something where we needed to go to a ballot question in April, then that would have to be passed by January.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the other thing I'd mention is the when you look at the likely levy for Girdwood, we have to account for the fact we're already levying a chunk of tax to pay for capital costs. So it was approaching 1 mil this year, 2025. I think it's a little below that next year. So it's not just that, if we're nominally at 5.8, we have 0.26. It's actually, we would have about 1.2 because we wouldn't be using current tax for capital. We could use this mechanism. So.
And one thing that may have to happen on the GVOS side is for us to consider capital projects that maybe are better for an assessment vote, like, for example, warm storage, building a new shop, which then is an effect that provides to everybody in the community, having a place to operate out of. I know I'm talking about is replacement of old glaciers all over there. And so, or the sand storage coverage. Things like that. So there may be 2 categories where we look at, because like Timberline is very specific to that area, and it sounds like through this assessment process, will really affect that part of that subdivision. So yeah, I think there's something for us to consider more with capital.
Based on my understanding of assessments, there's more flexibility. You have to be able to articulate how much benefit is accruing to each person, because it can be, linear feet frontage. It can be overall value. It can be just fixed rates for certain categories. There's quite a lot of different ways to do that.
Yeah.
And it can be a subset. It could just be commercial, for example. I'm not saying we would do that, but it could be.
Yeah.
Ross, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Rebecca, I got 2 of those options that you suggested, and I think there was a third one. Is one of them was a tax levy across all voters?
Across all voters within the Girdwood Valley service area. The second one was use available space under the service area tax cap in order to use tax dollars, which can already be accessed to the current structure, to pay for the lease back transaction. And the third was a special assessment on those properties whose value is directly impacted by the paving of Timberline Road. And it's the whole road that we're planning to pave? No, just part of it?
Oh, yep, it'll just be a quarter mile, maybe half a mile.
Okay, so that would be
Okay.
Pretty much.
Yeah, thanks for that recap. I missed the second one is the one I needed clarification on. Thanks for that recap.
And I think, to be fair, Timberline was the particular thing we bonded for last time, but our capital needs are broader than that.
Yeah,
It's one specific project.
using this method, because we're trying to balance is we have a large capital list, but if we can find ways to take some of these larger projects out of that capital list, then we can continue with our method of saving up until we get to the project. And getting things done. So yeah, we're just looking at all the options we can do to make it work. So
the meeting normally finished at 5. There's no actual requirement to extend the meeting. We can continue to discuss things. I did have a quick follow-up question on this. Because if it was a bond, then we would effectively, certain amounts of money would be released over time. You don't have, the day the bond was passed, it's not that all of the cash gets transferred. Is it the same model with the leaseback, or would the leaseback be, the whole value gets transferred at the beginning of the process and you start paying for that whole value?
If the question is being addressed to me, it could be structured in either way. It could be structured in either way. In other words, if you wanted something that operated like a line of credit, it could be operated as if it were a line of credit. That would be involving essentially a commitment from a bank to advance money over a period of time under the leaseback. Normally, all of it comes out all at once and it's held by a trustee and then dispersed to you as needed, so that the money that's held by the trustee is invested by you. And hopefully the investment earnings offset the cost of the debt service, the interest rate on the debt service. But you can also potentially structure it so that there is money advanced from time to time as capital project needs are required.
Okay. And in that second case, the payments would also vary over time, depending on how much of the capital had been advanced.
That is accurate. Usually there's a time limit on the advance of money. It's usually not a revolving line. Lawyers and bankers can think of all sorts of complexities, but usually it's not a revolver. Usually it's a drawdown and there's a drawdown period, let's say a year or 2 years or something like that. And then at the end, so you might be paying interest only during that drawdown period. And then after the full draw is made, then there's a fixed amortization schedule for the remaining term.
Okay, thank you.
So Cynthia, Mr. Chair, if I may, Cynthia, thank you. If it's a short construction project, like maybe one summer, they perhaps could borrow from the cash pool and we draw it all down and reimburse at one time as well as another option, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Could you say a little bit more about that? I'm slightly confused because that sounds similar to an approach we've tried in the past, and it didn't seem anymore. It wasn't something we could continue to consider.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Ross again. And I don't know if I introduced myself. I'm Ross Risvold, the Public Finance Manager in Public Finance. What was suggested to us at one time was an interfund loan, and interfund loans are just not a good appropriate thing for this. It's just not a good alternative financing mechanism for this project. Now, however, what a particular fund or enterprise fund can do at the municipality is they can borrow short term from the cash pool for a few months or a month or a week, and it's commonly done. And when they do that, they pay, if they have a negative equity position in the cash pool, they would pay an interest rate to the cash pool, but it's not technically a loan. It's just it's just a borrowing from the cash pool because you have a negative equity position. Funds typically do that because, as you know, we collect our taxes for the year. We collect property taxes for the year, not starting until like July or June 30th and August 31st. So a lot of our funds are borrowing from the cash pool until they receive their share of property taxes. So this is not an interfund loan, but it is a mechanism for a short period of time. Now, if it was going to go over the end of a year, it may not be quite appropriate to do that. But if this was going to be a road construction that's done in 3 or 4 months during a construction season in the summer, that might be an option as well. And then once it's done, then we pull the trigger and borrow the money under a lease-back transaction.
Okay, thank you.
Did that help?
That helped me.
Yeah, it helps a lot because you basically, you have, your true costs once you're done with the project.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions or comments on this topic? So I'm not 100% sure I'm clear what the next steps are. I think there's a 3 potential paths. I think some sense of both what our capital needs are and what the costs would be of those capital needs. Is that something you can work on, Kyle?
Yeah, I think we'll work with the team. And then I think at the next meeting for GBOS, we'll put on the list for capital budget discussion.
Okay.
And maybe against these different options, look at what are priorities. If we're going to do an assessment vote, if that's outside of the mill cap, then we may look at one of these larger projects that affects everybody within the valley through the services we provide, especially in roads.
Right. I think that becomes an interesting question of if you're doing a special assessment, but effectively using property assessment as the metric, then are you just simply doing an end run around a public vote when if the assessment is tied to the above?
Well, there should be a public vote, but only of the affected residents, right? Or you mean like the Title 19 special assessment on only the impacted properties?
Yes, but if the only impacted properties are every property in the service area.
You can argue every property.
Around the ballot question.
Fair point.
And if that doesn't have to be one person, one vote, is my understanding of with an assessment, it's your assessment liability that gives you the percentage of votes. So if you had 5 properties, simple example, if you had 5 properties affected and one of them is going to pay more than half the cost, they get more than half the votes effectively. So it's very different from a property tax vote.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any more questions on this? I think the next steps are clear.
Can I have a question?
About this
Yeah,
particular.
actually, it's just kind of in general. So sitting here listening, I guess I'm just curious, why isn't it an option that some funds for our capital projects comes from HLB? I mean, supposedly they're selling these lands for fair market value. However, to me, when we have major capital projects that are for roads and the culvert system is what I'm really coming down to, which is our roads within this community. They are our major capital projects. And, we're like 2 years out on some of these. Why isn't that discussed? Why? I mean, HLB, they are your guys's, the waterways are yours. You are responsible for the maintenance of them. HLB is. So why isn't some of that fair market value money coming back into the Girdwood Board of Supervisors so we can put it to our local capital projects?
Tiffany, do you want to take that one for historical perspective? Did you hear the question?
I did. I would have to ask for a legal opinion. I believe, I don't know that we've funded just general road projects for the service area. So I can get with legal.
You guys want to take that and we'll circle back with an answer on that one?
Yeah, sorry, couldn't find my microphone button.
Can I have explain that one another further statement? This also includes the levy of Old Girdwood. You guys, HLB is responsible for that. That is their maintenance, not the municipalities. It's HLB's. Where's the funds coming back into this community? Where does these capital projects are unfairly being put on the burden of this community? And we had the lowest mill rate in the entire community, entire Anchorage Borough. We don't have any money.
Not sure. Quincy, were you about to respond?
I didn't hear a question. I mean,
Okay,
I know the
that's
general
fine.
question, so I'm ready to respond to that one when we do the research.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on this? If not, we go to public comment. Any public comment? Do you have something?
Yeah, I'm going to add further to that if I could, please.
Okay, please go ahead.
Yes. So my name is Amanda Tuttle. I am a business owner in this community. I'm also one of the very few people who actually own commercial real estate, commercial lots in this valley. There's literally just a handful. It's actually a problem. We have no business. It's killing our economy locally. Anyways, my primary residence in the last 2 years, my property taxes have gone up 104%. And yet at the same time, the municipality, due to the lack of drainage and watershed management in this valley, you're flooding my property at the same time. I've got 5 to 7 feet of contaminated stormwater runoff flooding 3 of my lots. And my property taxes are going through the roof. But at the same time, I can't even build on my land because of the flooding issue, which is a culvert issue. I really want to see the municipality of Anchorage. Our taxes need to be represented. Public services come first, and our waters. They're the highest ruling governance in all the lands. You got to manage your waters. And the projects down here need to be funded. And if you're going to sit there and you're going to charge us these IGs, what are they called, those non-government, whatever, those IGCs, you know, if we're only getting the lowest mill rate back in this community, then I believe that those IGCs should also reflect what that mill rate is. We should have a reduced mill rate on all these basic services. It shouldn't be what you're charging Eagle River and everybody else. It's not fair. We're an entire community, and the municipality's management and treatment of this valley has killed our local economy. I pay over $100,000 a year to house employees right now. And if I don't house them, I can't keep my doors open. You guys have completely killed our economy. Housing is not an economy. We have to have businesses. And we need jobs. And we need to be able to take care of ourselves because you guys are out of our response area. You're 45 miles away. We have rights to snowplow lots. We have rights for making sure that our utilities to respond to crises is not stuck in behind your collapsed culvert system on Ruan. Our water treatment plant's failing. It's one of the most out of compliant in the state of Alaska. Like, HLB needs to be managing the waters. And if HLB doesn't take ownership of their lands, then why isn't the municipality? Or are you trying to tell me it's actually DNR? Because, well, that's still where they lay.
Any other public comment? If not, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you very much for everybody.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
Adjourn.
Did you get an answer from Maria?